The NFL's free agency period is pretty much over, outside of the very few household names that are still looking for contracts. Now, every team looks ahead to the most important part of the offseason, the NFL draft. Which teams go into that having nailed the offseason so far? Which teams not so much? I'm here to break all of that down on this week's episode of Turfed Football.
4-3. Blue 58! Blue 58!
NFL free agency is so fun because it can be so good for some teams and so bad for others, and we never really know until time goes on and things play themselves out. As for good moves, look at Sam Darnold and the Vikings last year. Yes, they drafted J.J. McCarthy in the first round, and a lot of fans might expect that he would start day one. Maybe he would have, but he got injured in the preseason, and without Sam Darnold on a one-year contract, the Vikings certainly would not have won 13 games. The guy was an MVP candidate, at least for some good portion of the season. Maybe it tailored off towards the end, but a very good contract. Look at Stephon Diggs being traded to the Buffalo Bills in 2020. Josh Allen went from a very inaccurate quarterback with flashes to an MVP candidate just like that. So with that said, I do think it is very important for teams to nail the free agency period because, again, it can either be the difference between winning 5 more games in a season and it can set them back 3 to 4 to 5 seasons, depending on how bad and how reachy some of these trades or extensions or contracts are. When it comes to my favorite moves in this year's NFL offseason, I think I have to start with Philadelphia Eagles edge rusher Josh Sweat signing a 4-year, $76.4 million contract with the Arizona Cardinals. And I'll start this one by giving you some context as to how bad the Cardinals pass rush was. Not just over the last couple of seasons after Chandler Jones, unfortunately, has just fallen off the map, but particularly last year. They were the only team in the league without at least one pass rusher to record 40 pressures. Their highest pressure total from any pass rusher was Zaven Collins with 31. And I don't think anyone in the NFL or in the NFL media landscape believes Zaven Collins is a top-tier pass rusher. So the Cardinals certainly came into this offseason with the plan that, hey, we got to improve our defensive front. And by signing Josh Sweat, I think that is a really good first step. Outside of Budda Baker, again, since Chandler Jones stopped playing, the Arizona Cardinals defense has not had pretty much any playmakers. I think Josh Sweat is that. He reunites with his former defensive coordinator in Philadelphia, Jonathan Gannon. I apologize for almost screwing up that name. He was the defensive coordinator when Philly went to the Super Bowl against Kansas City and lost in 2022. And in terms of sack totals, that was Josh Sweat's best season. He had 11 sacks in the regular season. The past 3 years, Josh Sweat, 22.5 sacks, 188 pressures between both the regular and postseason. So he is a legitimate difference maker off the edge. We saw what he can do in this year's Super Bowl. And for some people, maybe they think, well, he got overpaid, he's overrated because of one huge performance. But to me, I see a gamer. I see a difference maker against the NFL's best offense over the past, let's call it a decade almost, with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. One of the best offensive duos, arguably in the history of the sport, and he was able to absolutely dismantle them. He had 2.5 sacks in the game, 6 pressures. In my opinion, he was probably the actual Super Bowl MVP. I think Jalen Hurts had a great game, no slight to him. But it really was the Philly defense, in my opinion, that just absolutely stoned the Kansas City Chiefs. So having seen what Josh Sweat was able to do in that game, I think is something that at least I would certainly covet as an NFL general manager. As a Bills fan, we've seen guys like Greg Rousseau and Ed Oliver do so good in the regular season, but when it comes to facing the Chiefs in the playoffs, they go quiet. So yeah, Josh Sweat might not have 12 to 15 sacks with 80 pressures and a 25% pass rush win rate like we see from Myles Garrett or Micah Parsons, but he has shown a tendency to step up in the game's biggest moments. Teams from the edge position want difference makers and game wreckers. Josh Sweat did that in the biggest game of his life, and for only less than $20 million a year. To me, it's worth every penny. I thought he would get 20 plus at least. He will only be the 12th highest paid per season edge rusher in 2025, a number that's only going to come down when TJ Watt gets an extension, Trey Hendrickson gets an extension, Micah Parsons gets an extension, etc., etc. So I think the Arizona Cardinals nailed that signing. To me, that was the best signing of the free agency window, because the next move that I'm going to talk about is actually a trade. But to me, the Arizona Cardinals absolutely nail it. 4 years, $76.4 million to former Eagles edge rusher and Super Bowl champion Josh Sweat. Moving on to my next favorite move in the NFL's free agency window, it's the Las Vegas Raiders trading for Geno Smith. My first reaction, I'll be honest, was great. Congratulations, Las Vegas. You've just booked yourself a ticket to 9-8. But to be honest, Las Vegas kind of needs that. I mean, here's this multi-billion-dollar stadium, this huge brand name, right? It's the Raiders, ton of prime time, and they haven't been able to win a thing over the past few years. I know they were in the wild card back in, I think, 2021 and lost to Cincinnati, who went on to get to the Super Bowl, but it's been embarrassment after embarrassment after embarrassment over the past few seasons. Multiple head coaches. Now Pete Carroll comes in and reunites himself with a former quarterback of his in Seattle, where Geno Smith had the best season of his career in 2022. Personal bold take, I think Geno Smith, and maybe not bold take, because I do think that Geno is a well-liked player around the league. I think that he's probably a top 10 quarterback. Around that range, 9, 10, maybe 8. I don't have a list of faces or names in front of me to compare him to at this moment, but I do think that he is a very solid bridge quarterback. Now, me liking this move is contingent on a couple of things. One of which, and I'm not some sort of Raiders insider, so I don't necessarily know where things are going right now. I hope that the Raiders don't extend Geno Smith. If I'm correct, he's 35, turning 36, somewhere within that range. He's obviously an older player. Now, quarterbacks in this age are able to play at higher levels longer because of the rules and the fact that they can't be touched with a spoon from 15 yards away. But again, Geno Smith is getting older, and to me, this should be looked at as just a pure bridge move and not some sort of, oh, we're going to sign you to 3 years, $120 million plus, and extend you and have you be the face of the franchise for the next 3 to 4 years. I know it's not a great draft quarterback-wise this year, but I think this move would be great if they don't extend Geno Smith and they draft Shedeur Sanders if he gets to number 6. I think that their styles are very, very similar. They like to operate pretty much only from the pocket. A lot of people would look at Shedeur Sanders and the ice and the watches and all that stuff and think, oh, well, you know, he must be super, super athletic and run all around and make crazy plays off script. But that really isn't who he is. He's best throwing from the pocket. He's very accurate, and that's the exact same player that Geno Smith has been over the past 3 years. So to me, you couple that with Geno's story and, again, the similar play style, I think he'd be a perfect mentor to Shedeur Sanders, who I don't think is ready to be a starter day one. But if he were to come in and learn from a player who is very similar to himself, a veteran who has been thrown in the dumps, has been a backup, has been chirped and etc., and somehow able to get through all of that and become a very good NFL quarterback after all these years, I think would go a long way for Shedeur. Just kind of a stat comparison here. Geno led the NFL at 69.8% in 2022 and had a 70.4% completion percentage this year. Sanders leads college football, or FBS, all-time at 71.8% completion percentage, and this year had a 74% completion percentage. So, again, operate from the pocket and be very, very accurate. And Shedeur can throw over the middle of the field. He can throw outside the numbers. The same thing we've seen from Geno in Seattle over the past few seasons. Geno will win games. He will put asses in seats. He will not embarrass the Raiders in prime time. I think right now that's really what the Raiders need. I don't think anyone's asking them to win a Super Bowl right now or even next season, but they have to start winning games. And I think that Pete Carroll's a great start. I think Geno Smith is another good step, but they still need a face of the franchise, if you will. And I don't think that's Geno Smith, but I think he could groom Shedeur Sanders into being that face. So for now, Geno steps in. He wins them 9-10 games. It's a tough division with Los Angeles and Harbaugh, and of course the Kansas City Chiefs. Even Denver now is getting better. I really like the Sean Payton-Bo Nix connection. They went to a playoff game this year. So they needed to be competitive. And I think Geno will help them be that. And then if they do draft Shedeur, assuming he's able to get past the Giants, which is looking less and less likely as we get closer and closer to the draft, I think he would be a great bridge/mentor to the eventual face of the franchise, Shedeur Sanders. And let me quickly add that a lot of people have now crossed the Raiders' name off the list of potentially drafting a QB in this year's draft. I think personally, this puts them higher up my list. This team would not have been conducive to a rookie quarterback the way it's currently constructed. It's not good enough. And none of these rookie quarterbacks are good enough to go and be a day one starter on a team that's not good enough around them. By getting Geno Smith, that rookie will not have to start day one. They learn from a great QB and eventually take over the reins down the line. A lot of people think this is it. Raiders aren't drafting a quarterback this year. To me, I think there's an even greater chance that they do. All right, on to the not so nice moves. I really hated and would be so disgusted if I were a Texans fan that they traded away left tackle Laremy Tunsil. First of all, if you think that Laremy Tunsil is getting old, sure, he's on the plus side of 30, but Trent Williams is turning 37 this season. Deion Dawkins for the Bills is turning 31 this season. Laremy Tunsil is older, but he's not old. And these days, there's numerous examples of offensive tackles that have continued to stay extremely productive into their 30s. I mean, Trent Williams may be an anomaly, so to speak, but he's going to be 37, and he is still a top left tackle in the league. So to trade Laremy Tunsil because what? He was getting old, and to have some sort of influx of young talent at left tackle would be best. I don't really agree with that. Right now, you have Nico Collins and CJ Stroud entering the primes of their careers. You want to protect Stroud especially as best as you can, and Laremy Tunsil was by far the best player on the Houston Texans offensive line at doing that. Their line this year was an absolute disaster. Garbage. CJ Stroud faced pressure on 39% of his dropbacks last season. That was the third highest mark in the NFL. And he was only responsible for 12.1% of those dropbacks, which quarterbacks can be responsible for those sometimes. That was just the 19th highest rate in the NFL. So the offensive line was terrible. I fortunately got to work on the Halloween game, the Jets-Texans game. Go watch that. Go watch that game, because if you don't think that the Houston Texans need offensive line help, go watch that game. It was so bad. It was so bad, and I'm sure there's numerous other examples. As for Tunsil, he was great. His 23 pressures allowed was the 12th best in the NFL, and a 98.1 efficiency rate, according to PFF, was tied for 4th. And you're going to trade that guy? Sure, I know he false starts the odd time, but I mean, come on. To me, that makes next to no sense. They went out and I guess they signed Cam Robinson, left tackle, for the Jacksonville Jaguars for some time. And then last year he replaced Christian Darrisaw at left tackle for the Vikings after he went down with injury. 64 pressures allowed, the worst mark in the NFL. And now you're drafting at 25, 26, I think one of those two numbers. I think 25 in a class that is not really known for having great tackles. I mean, even the best tackles in this draft, like Will Campbell, for example, everyone thinks is probably going to kick inside to guard, or at least should. So I don't really understand what the Texans were thinking when they decided to make that move. Perhaps something went on behind the scenes, but now they have basically forced themselves into having to trade up with next to no leverage because everyone and their grandmother knows exactly what they'll be trading up for to replace a player that was already really good. So that to me just makes absolutely zero sense. Credit to the Washington Commanders for perhaps making that call. I don't know who started it, but if they did, good on them, and poor on the Houston Texans for making that deal. Again, maybe something goes on behind the scenes that we don't know about. He requested a trade, someone blew up, got pissed, whatever. You never know. But that one to me was an absolute head scratcher, and I guess we'll see what the Texans do in the draft. And last but not least, my other not so nice move of this year's NFL free agency period. The Pittsburgh Steelers trading a second round pick in this year's draft for DK Metcalf and proceeding to sign him to a 5-year, $150 million contract. That makes DK at $33 million a year the fourth highest paid receiver per year in the NFL. Do you think he's worth that? Because I sure as shit don't. I think DK is an incredible athlete. I think he's a good receiver. I don't think he's a top 5 receiver by any means. And again, I understand that the market in today's NFL, pretty much regardless of position, but certainly at receiver, is everyone basically just leapfrogging each other. I mean, Jamar Chase just got $40 million a season. That's crazy, even though he's pretty much worth every penny. But then what? Are you going to sign George Pickens to a $25 million plus contract next offseason? Or this season? He's eligible for an extension. I mean, here's two guys that really live and die by the deep ball, and you don't even have a quarterback. To me, it really just doesn't make any sense. DK's incredible when he's running slants and breaking a tackle and taking them 60 yards, and he's incredible when he's going to outmuscle and outrun a corner to the outside and get downfield. But to me, that's pretty similar to what George Pickens does, right? He's a deep threat. He's a pretty good contested catcher. He adds verticality to your offense. DK does the same thing, and again, you don't have a quarterback. So what's the plan? Signing Russell Wilson to throw moonballs up to these two guys and, I don't know, win 8-9 games and pick 22 again next year? I get that the franchise and Mike Tomlin and TJ Watt, everyone's too stubborn to go and rebuild and lose a whole bunch of games to get a top-tier quarterback, but you're now going to be, assuming you do extend Pickens as well, dishing out a boatload of money to these two receivers with no one throwing the ball to them. Not to mention, I think outside of receiver now, and obviously quarterback, the Pittsburgh Steelers have a lot of holes to fill. Jalen Warren's a cool 1A, 1B type running back, but I don't think he's a feature back. And it's a good running back class. There's needs in the secondary, big time. A lot of Steelers insiders, people on Twitter that I see, want them to draft defensive tackle in the first round. So who's going to play QB? I mean, you only had so many picks to begin with. You give up a second-round pick. In this year's draft, that's very valuable. The depth of this draft is what's best. So to give that up for what feels like a really planless move doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Again, I think DK is a very similar player in a lot of ways to George Pickens, and I don't know why the Steelers feel the need to have two of those players, especially, again, when there's no quarterback. Maybe I'll like this move a lot more if the Steelers sit at 21 and sit at 21 and draft Jackson Dart, because I like Jackson Dart, and I do think he's the third best QB in this class. But to have trading for and extending DK Metcalf feel like your priority move this offseason as opposed to, if you check out my last video, I thought it'd be a really great idea to just bring back Justin Fields. 2-year, $20 million. You weren't willing to pay that for him to return. It seemed like he wanted to come back. And then you draft a quarterback to sit behind him and learn, or let him be the bridge with a heck of a lot more upside than Russell Wilson and a 42-year-old busted up knee at ayahuasca taking Aaron Rodgers to throw moon balls or sidearm throws to DK Metcalf and George Pickens for 9 wins. And now you're locked into DK at $33 a year for 5 years. I know NFL contracts and, money and all that seems like it's fake these days, but it really isn't. And again, there can be a lot of outs built into moves where it becomes a 3-year, $100 million as opposed to the actual 5-year, $150 million. But still, I don't know. Looking at that number and a second-round pick for a player that feels like you kind of already have to some extent doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Right now, the priority, and it has been for the last few years, should be quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've gotten away with whoever at that position because their defense is so good and they're so well coached that they're able to win a whole bunch of games. But I don't know. I don't really understand this one. And they don't really run the ball that well. Their offensive line isn't great. To me, it just feels like putting a Band-Aid on a huge cut. The Pittsburgh Steelers are good enough to win games and get into a playoff against whoever and lose the wild card. And for some teams, that's great. For the Las Vegas Raiders, I think that would be a very successful season this year. But to continue to do that over and over and over again and put Band-Aids on holes year after year while ignoring the real problem, to me, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So, sure, throw a very athletic, fun-to-watch player, I'll admit, on the field, DK Metcalf. Pair him with George Pickens. We'll see how things go. I'm sure it'll be extremely fun at times, but I'm sure for Steelers fans, it's going to be extremely frustrating at times as well. When the offense doesn't move the ball as well as you'd like, because it's Russell Wilson or it's Aaron Rodgers, and who knows if they'll even have a contingency plan like Jackson Dart behind them this season. So that just about wraps it, folks. Super excited to have shared my thoughts with you. Leave a comment if you agree. If you're a Steelers fan and you hate me now, please let me know. It'll be fun to catch up. That does it for this week. So now I think I'm going to be all about the NFL draft, which I've already been in some of my other videos. I've mostly watched the corners and the defensive tackles and the edge rushers because that's, as a Bills fan, what I believe they will be looking to do. At least that's according to Keon Coleman on a podcast with Chad Ochocinco and Shannon Sharp today, or yesterday, or whenever it was. So those are the positions I've watched mostly. I'll probably do a video on a couple of the edge rushers soon. That's it for today. Thanks you all for watching. Like I said, leave a comment, follow me on Twitter, chirp me for all I care. I think it'll be fun, and we'll get some good banter going about these moves. See if you like them or hate them as well. Cheers, guys.